All right. And that's it, guys. We are live. And as you can see, I am actually not in my workshop right now. I am somewhere in South Florida because every once in a while you got to, put the chisel down and you got to take a vacation, fly to South Florida and hang out with your family on the beach for a couple of days. So that's what I'm doing. I actually planned on getting this out yesterday, but we woke up at 2 a.m. or 2:30 a.m. to catch a flight for I think 7 a.m., which it was delayed, and we ended up not getting in the air until around 10 a.m. And so by the time I got into our Airbnb here and everything got settled, I mean, there was just no way in hell that I was going to have the mental bandwidth to sit down with you guys and do this. And especially if we're talking about Chladni patterns and FFT and all that madness, which I think we might get into a little bit today. I perused some of your comments on Discord and on YouTube, and that and the compensation / intonation stuff with the saddle seems to be what everyone's talking about. So that's what we're going to do. And meanwhile, by the way, as we're going, if you guys have questions just live on the spot that you want to address, please post them. I'd love to get into something other than Chladni patterns and intonation as well. And I don't think this will be a super long one, by the way, guys. We might cut this a little bit short because I got stuff to do, but we'll get into it. So first of all, if you like what I do and you get a little something out of the lessons that I teach, go to ericschaeferguitars.com. There you can find the schedule of dates for my hands-on workshops. I've got workshops coming up in March. There's 2 of them. One of them is full, and there's only 1 spot in the other class. So if you want that, I would jump on that real quick. And then after that, there's some other courses further on in the summer and definitely some in the fall as well. So lots of dates. Check that out, ericschaeferguitars.com. And also, while you're on ericschaeferguitars.com, you can check out the online course Building an OM Acoustic. If you want to learn how to do all this stuff from home and you want the most detailed, just end-to-end description of how to build a guitar from start to finish, well, ericschaeferguitars.com, take the Building an OM Acoustic course. And lastly, we do have the Tonewood shop now at ericschaeferguitars.com. So if you want to check out some of the wood we have there, we've got some new Spessart oak, super flake Spessart oak, and I cut up a bunch of Wengi too, and I put that up there. So check that out, ericschaeferguitars.com. All right. Now, with all that silliness out of the way, we can get right into the geeky, luthery stuff that we want to get into. So let me jump into the Discord here. By the way, the Discord is a members-only Discord for members of the online course that I just mentioned. So if you want to be a part of the conversation that's going on here, you can join that. You can buy the Building an OM Acoustic course, and then you will have access to all the fun stuff that we're doing over here. All right, so let's check this out. After I posted my video on fully compensated saddles, how to make fully compensated saddles, I got a bunch of comments both on YouTube and in the Discord about that. And the first one that I have here comes from Larry Kuhn. And so Larry Kuhn writes, "Hi, I stumbled on this video on YouTube about a minute after you posted it, and I'm watching it now. Question on the initial carve starting around 17 minutes. You covered the B string and the long edge across the wound string." So what he's talking about is in the video, I really only filmed portions of the carve itself where I was cutting the steep ramp into the B string, and the long edge that he's referring to is the fact that from the E, the low E, to the G string, so all of your wound strings, they all move from the back of the saddle to the front of the saddle in a relatively straight line. And so rather than carving individual ramps for each one of those 4 strings, what I do and what a lot of people do isn't really my thing. This is actually just a generic, fully compensated saddle thing. What a lot of people do is just carve a peak that's slightly angled across the saddle so that it starts at the back edge for the low E and ends at the front edge for the G string. Although not fully at the edge, because then you're kind of you're creating a knife point at that edge, and also that intonation point on an 1/8 of an inch saddle at least usually sits a little bit further back than that. I digress. Getting back to his comment here. You covered the B string and the long edge across the wound strings, and I assume the high E is the same as the B except from the opposite direction. He's talking about how it's carved. So yeah, the high E is towards the front, the nut facing part of the saddle, and the B is towards the back, the pin facing edge of the saddle. But you carve, what he's asking is, do you carve them the same way? Yes, they're carved the same way, but just from, you're pushing the ramp from the opposite direction. I assume the high E is the same as the B, except from the opposite direction. But I only saw you cut on one side of the nut at each string. Do you also cut the opposite side to create more of a knife edge, or do you leave a little flat spot behind each cut? I think the B string especially matters. For the other strings, the cut is the ramp transitioning down to the bridge pin. But since the B string ramp is on the fingerboard side, there's just a sharp edge and no ramp leading to the bridge pin. Okay, so I get the spirit of what he's asking. He's basically asking, do I do work on both sides of that intonation point to move it around, or do I just push it from one side or the other so that I can move it in the direction I want it to go? And really the best way to answer your question is just to reinforce the point that like these angles when I'm carving these ramps are really shallow. They're kind of just barely what you need to be able to create clearance for that string so that the string is actually resting on a peak where you intend it to intonate rather than just randomly somewhere else on the saddle. If you were carving your ramp super steep, you'd be creating too much of a knife edge on those points. So it doesn't, when I carve, let's just say the E string, for example, I don't hit it from the front edge. I just work the back edge until I meet that point, because again, it's a very shallow ramp and I'm not really creating a knife edge by just doing it from the one side because the ramp is so shallow. But you could, this is the kind of thing, you could work it from both sides. You could do a little bit of work on the front edge if you felt like that would, improve things a little bit and make it a smoother transition to that intonation point. I don't have anything against that. I will say also, this wasn't included in the video, but I'm not sure if I mentioned it at all. I think I talked about dressing up the saddle a little bit, but I know I didn't show it. The video was going a little bit long, so I wanted to end it at a decent point. But after you carve your ramps, or after I carve my ramps, I'm always taking little pieces of sandpaper and just smoothing over the whole top of the thing. So it really, all of those hard edged ramps get kind of smoothed out a little bit. Okay. And in that way, it actually looks a lot more like the fully compensated saddles that you see on factory guitars, right? They don't have really hard, sharp edges, usually, I guess. Okay, let me see what his second question is here. He says, second question regards refining the intonation on a compensated saddle. The premise of my question is that it's way easier to file it more than to go to the other way, just like carving braces. Yeah, what he's saying, it's way easier to remove material than it is to add it back on, right? Because you really can't do that. Then he asks, am I reasonable in thinking that it's prudent to undercut each shot so that intonating almost always means you're cutting away more at each string location? Yes. So I'm glad you asked this. There's actually somebody else on the YouTube comments that asked basically the same thing. So in the video, I think I maybe gave you guys the impression that you can mark out this pattern onto the saddle and then make all your cuts and put it in there, and it'll be just perfect. And you know what? There's actually a good chance that it will be just perfect. But there's also a good chance that you're going to want to refine those a little bit. You'd be surprised how much, if your saddle slot is positioned appropriately, which is a big if. You know, a lot of cheaper guitars, actually, that's not quite the case. And for you, if you're building the guitar yourself, if you're new to this, you might be off a little bit one way or the other. But I'm very used to, I know exactly where my saddle slots end up, and I cut a lot of them, and then I also make a lot of compensated saddles. And so after you just do that time and time and time again, it really becomes a pretty rote process where you expect your saddle to end up a certain way every time. And so rather than filing just a little bit, checking it, taking it off, filing it again, more and more I just mark where I think everything should go, and I just make the cuts, and it works. But you're right that it's prudent to actually draw it out, just like I show in the video, all your intonation points, but then carve, maybe staying a 64th of an inch might be a reasonable way to think about it, 64th of an inch off of those final points, just so you have a little bit more to go. So you can check it. Maybe a couple of those strings are already good, so you stop there, and maybe a couple of them you then realize you want to file a little bit more. So that's the reasonable way to do it. You're absolutely right, Larry. Okay, let's jump to another question here. I think now we're going to get into the Chladni pattern discussion, which this is kind of funny because this thread has been on the Discord, let's see, since April 23rd, 2025. And actually, this is the first time seeing it. So I think I just somehow missed this whole crazy discussion. And man, it goes on and on and on. And what I'm not going to do is read any large portion of this, because there's just too much. It's really brilliant stuff, though, that these guys are talking about. And I'm really glad that they got into this on here. I actually learned quite a bit just by perusing through this. But really, I'm going to use this as a vehicle to just talk about Chladni patterns at least a little bit, if you guys aren't aware of it. And I want to highlight some things that these guys did bring up in the discussion. So first of all, what is a Chladni pattern? Oh, and this is funny. This is Larry Kuhn again, by the way, on this question that this thread that we're getting into. So what is a Chladni pattern? Chladni pattern is a way of visualizing what you hear, essentially. So we talk a lot about the modal movements or the vibrations of the guitar top, but it's all a little bit abstract. With Chladni patterns, you can really truly see the different modes that you get from vibrating a guitar top. And essentially you do that by putting a loose material onto the vibrational surface, in this case, a guitar top, and you are going to, in some way, excite that guitar top by tapping on it, or having some vibrational input into the top. And what's going to happen is that loose material, in this case, Larry Kuhn was using parsley flakes. That loose material is going to organize itself on the guitar top in a pattern that basically outlines the different modes. And so if you excite it at different frequencies, you can identify all of your various modes, your monopole, your cross dipole, your long dipole, on and on. You can identify all of those by trying different frequencies until you find that the parsley flakes settle in a pattern that is known to reflect those modes. Basically, what's happening is when you excite the top is going to move in a variety of different ways. And the areas of greatest excursion, of greatest movement of the top, those are called antinodes. That's where the top is moving the most. And so your parsley flakes are going to actually be pushed off of those antinodes, the places where there's the most movement, and they're going to settle into essentially the valleys where there's no movement, which are called nodes. Uh, so basically, a vibrating body can be organized into antinodes and nodes. And it's a great way of understanding it, because when you think of it that way, you know, the parsley is going to settle where the top's not moving because it gets pushed there. And now you have a literal visual map of all your nodes, and it'll form a pattern that reflects either monopole movement, cross dipole, or long dipole, or a bunch of others, cross tripole. I think we'll see a little bit here. So we'll take a look at these. So he's got some great pictures here. Let me just jump over to StreamYard to make sure you guys can see this. Yes, you can. Very good. All right. So he's got his guitar right here with the parsley flakes, and you can see the parsley flakes have all kind of moved to the edges. This would most likely be your monopole. So if you think about it, the monopole modal movement is when the top is moving in a pumping action in a uniform way. So the whole vibrational footprint of the top, which is basically the lower bout, is going to be pumping up and down, which of course you think of those parsley flakes, where are they going to go if the whole top is going like this? Well, they're actually going to organize themselves right around the rim, because the rim is not pumping, it's not moving. That's actually held steady and rigid by the sides themselves. Okay, that's your node in that case. And then the rest, the middle of the top, is your antinode, where you don't see parsley. If we go to this one, it looks like another. I would, you know, and I'm not the best on these, by the way. So I just want to be clear. I don't do Chladni patterns in my shop. I don't like have a Chladni pattern generator like Larry Kuhn has here. So I'm kind of giving you guys an idea of the basic concept. I might get a couple of these pictures wrong, though, in my diagnosis here. But this, to me, looks like another monopole, again, with the parsley flakes organizing at the rim. And here, pretty clearly, I'd say we have a cross dipole, because you've got the parsley flakes. You can see this straight line going up the center. It's a little lopsided, but more or less it's going up the center of the top there. And then you also have the parsley flakes at the edge and a little at the bottom. And what that is, if you imagine what a cross dipole is, it's the node is at the center of the vibrational plate, and the antinodes are to either side of that. And this is along the axis of the bridge, right? Along the transverse axis of the bridge. A long dipole would be going the other way along the axis of the bridge, still with the bridge being your node, where there's no movement, right? So on a long dipole, you would have the parsley flakes organized at the bridge, but they would be going transversely across the lower bout rather than longitudinally up towards the sound hole. If you're listening to this on audio, this might be a little hard to map out in your mind as you're, you know, driving your car or whatever you're doing. But if you're actually watching this, you can see it on the picture pretty clearly. So I'm trying to over-explain for the audio guys, but yeah, it's definitely better if you're watching this too. I have no idea what this is right here. Here you got a clump of parsley right in the middle, and then all the parsley around the edges. I mean, I guess that would almost be like the monopole, but clearly there's an antinode right at the center, basically at the center of the X, where it's going to be stiffest. But yeah, I don't know what I would call that if I was trying to define that as a Chladni pattern. This one as well is a little bit ambiguous to me. You know, it could be a long dipole, but it could also be a cross tripole. Little hard to tell, so I'm going to skip that one. This one here is a cross tripole. So look at this, and remember our description of the cross dipole. This is the same thing as that, but now we have two longitudinal lines going up. And so if you think about what a cross dipole is, di meaning two, you have two antinodes moving with a node in the middle. Here we have three antinodes, these big empty spaces, with two nodes in the middle. And that's how you get your cross tripole. I don't know what this one is, some sort of quadrupole thing. I don't know. It's a mess of parsley. That's what that is. And I really don't know what this is. That's a whole big mess of parsley. Okay, well, and yeah, now I think we're back to the beginning here. This is monopole again. All right, so I think for some of you guys who maybe never even heard of Chladni patterns or heard of them but weren't really sure what they were, I just wanted to give you sort of my 2 cents on it. Again, I'm not deep in the weeds on Chladni patterns. I more or less just have a little bit of book knowledge on it, but I don't actually have practical experience with them because it's just not something I've gotten into. Okay. Oh, here's a nice one from a picture of Chladni pattern from Rick Malloy. I know Rick Malloy's doing a lot of this. In fact, in this conversation, he talks about he has a, you guys might want to check this out. He has a frequency analyzer on his website, which, Rick, you'll have to tell us what your website is because honestly, I don't know it off the top of my head. He has a frequency analyzer on there. Here I can see he made a Chladni pattern. This is a cross tripole again. You see that, guys? 3 antinodes and the 2 nodes in the middle there. What was I saying? He has a frequency analyzer on his website. So that's not Chladni patterns, by the way. Frequency analyzer is so that you can actually input the sound of your guitar from tapping it, and it will analyze that frequency and map it out for you on the graph. And I think on his frequency analyzer, you can then locate the peaks, which are going to be, are going to line up with whatever those peak frequencies are going to line up with your modes that we were just talking about. And then I think on his analyzer, you can even play back the tone of those peaks, that frequency, which is cool because you can then use that. You can like take a speaker with that tone playing that you just identified. Let's say you identified this particular frequency as the monopole. You can then hold that up to your guitar and, you know, see how your guitar reacts to that tone, almost as like a way of double checking, right? It's one thing to see on a graph that frequency, but then you can actually kind of take it into the real world and play it against your guitar. At least I think that's what Rick is doing there. He could tell you more about it. And then the last thing in this thread here that I just wanted to bring to your attention, because this was new to me. Here, I'm gonna, if you give me a moment, I'll pull this up on the screen. There is a tool available that I'd never heard of from Gallup Guitars, actually, from Brian Gallup at Gallup Guitars. All right, so let's remove that. I just want to pull this up on the screen, guys. So give me 1 second here. I'm getting a little quicker at this every time. Share screen. There we go. All right, this is on Instagram here. All right. Let me make sure. Yeah, there we go. It's showing the screen. Okay. I'm going to play this and then I'm going to shut up. Here we go.
On an acoustic guitar, if I hold it up and I want to dampen the strings with my hand and I use the sonic hammer to tap on the face, I can see that this top is resonating at 187 hertz. If I tap up here and get it over the sound hole, I can see that the air resonance of this instrument is 103 hertz. Another killer function of this hammer is in the selection of tone wood. As we all know, when you tap on tone wood, you can hear it resonating, which definitely gives you a quality reading on this. But if I take the hammer and I hit it in the center, it reads out 66 hertz. If I hold it here, I can get 138. If I hold it here and hit it, I can see that I get 53 hertz, which is the twisting bending mode, which, by the way, is extremely difficult to get. And that's a great function for selecting tone woods and working with the Acoustic sonic calculator, which is something I would suggest that you pair with it. But the way that we really use it most of the time is in a plate like this, where I can hit it and I can get a resonant frequency on this actual unit, which in this case here is 172 hertz. So that's really effective for tuning. So the Acusonic Sonic Hammer is now available through Acusonics or Gallup Guitars or the Gallup School of Luthery. If you would like more information, go to info@acusonics.com.
Okay. I just thought that was super cool. I think I'm going to get one of those. Even if I can imagine ways that it wouldn't work perfectly, but you know, in this world where you're trying to analyze frequencies and stuff, where you're really doing this left brain stuff, nothing does. And for me, I don't do a lot of this frequency analysis stuff. And so having something simple like that, it's basically a hammer with a microphone on it that's then able to, you know, spit out a reading of the hertz for you. That just seems like a really simple way for someone like me who's not going to use a Chladni pattern generator to be able to do something sort of during the build and at the end of the build in order to at least log a little bit of the results that I'm getting. Because I do want to do more things like that. I tend to just build guitars and, you know, play them and experience them at the end and just kind of go from there, right? Rather than getting into the weeds with this kind of stuff. Okay, let's see. Don't really have any questions from you guys. We'll jump over to YouTube for a little bit. I want to see, I'm running a little bit short on time here, but we'll breeze through some things on YouTube. There was definitely some stuff there that I was interested in. So once again, let me just pop on over. Okay, share screen. Here we go. Now we're getting somewhere. All right. Let's see. We'll just kind of start from the top here. Whenever I do the YouTube comments, I just like to, you know, I spend time on the Discord, but there's so many comments on YouTube, and it's kind of fun to just kind of breeze through these, and especially since we don't have a whole heck of a lot of time left. Let's see. Jonah Guitar Guy writes, good info. I like to use the string. Okay, so this is on most recent video I just put out, which was on, I was just doing a truss rod adjustment on a Santa Cruz guitar. He writes, good info. I like to use the string to check the relief, just like you explained. We are only concerned with the nut to body length of the neck. So yeah, what he's talking about is if you're using the string to check your relief, using the string as a straight edge. A lot of you guys do that. A lot of people do that. And then I think that's a fine way of doing it. You depress the string at the first fret, and then you depress the string at the neck to body fret, simply because it's a little bit better of a straight edge than depressing it all the way on the last fret, simply because the fretboard tongue is not actually a part of the neck. And if you're checking relief, you're checking the neck bow. You're not checking the overall straightness of the fretboard. And actually, I did read this comment earlier, so I know where he's going with this. And this is a great, well, let me just finish this and then I'll talk about it. We are only concerned with the nut to body length of the neck. And then he goes, then you went ahead and used the air quotes better way. And what he's talking about is I used a notched straight edge that extends to the very end of the fretboard. So you didn't get an accurate reading. The neck will be flatter than your measurement. I'm sure it's still in an acceptable range. The ultimate test will be if you get buzz. If not, all is good. If you do get buzz, just add a bit of relief. I'm not being critical. I know you are a logical, reasoned thinker. I often contradict myself with the camera running, and since I've already went on and on, let me add this. With no string tension, I adjust the truss rod so I have a slight rock in the neck. Then with the strings on, the relief is typically right where I want it. Okay, cool. Yeah, I've heard of people doing that. I've never tried that myself. Okay, yeah, so he's actually absolutely 100% right. I don't even really have much to say, or really anything to say to that. It is definitely more accurate to use really anything that is just reading the neck length rather than reading the whole length. I actually think I've just used the notch straight edges for so long for a variety of things, including the relief. I actually had never really even thought about it that as a contradiction, but he's absolutely right. Using those notch straight edges, they are reading from the first fret to the very last fret. And if you have a slight bow in your neck, like you should, but then also the fretboard tongue that's running out over the body is, let's say, flipped up a little bit, which is quite common actually, that the fretboard tongue would be slightly higher. Essentially, the tension that's pulling on the neck it is also going to be pushing on that fretboard tongue, which can have it's your equal and opposite reaction kind of thing, where that pull on the neck then puts pressure on the soundboard, which pushes up the fretboard tongue slightly. Very common to have that slight rise at the end of the fretboard because of that. And again, with the not straight edge or even just a regular straight edge that's running the full length of the neck, you're going to be at least slightly, and he made that point in here as well, that it might be very small, I mean, it might still be in an acceptable range, and that's all fine and well. But if you want to be totally accurate, I think I know Jonah is totally right here. To be the most accurate, you want to be reading the neck portion of the fretboard and ignoring the fretboard tongue. Very good, Jonah. I appreciate that, and I appreciate you. Let's see what else we got. Oh, UAL writes, intonation up the neck is everything. Once you invest in a great tuner, your ear will learn very quickly to hear subtle imperfections. I second that. I can totally agree with that. My own experience, at one point I just had the little shitty, crappy tuners, and getting a strobe tuner, I remember always thinking I was hearing the beating, when you're tuning to up to accuracy, hearing that little slight beating between your reference tone and the string you're trying to tune, and thinking that I was spot on. But once you get a strobe tuner and you're dialing it in sort of in much tighter tolerances, your ear will start to catch up. And then when you're just either playing the guitar or tuning it without a tuner, you notice just a little bit more. At least that's been the case with me. Sounds like it was also the case with UAL, which is just another reason to get a strobe tuner, is even just to like up your game as far as your ear is concerned. Okay, straight saddle exists only for cutting corners and costs. Yeah, I don't disagree with that. So in that video, I was talking about how I made a guitar with a straight saddle, and then the person whose guitar it was then wanted a fully compensated saddle because he was just noticing some intonation issues. Listen, man, we live in a world like everyone cuts corners and cuts costs somewhere on some things. You can say that, but you don't know anything about the instrument that we're talking about. You don't know how much the instrument costs. So I'm cutting costs in certain areas, but then of course, if that person wants that thing, I'll take the thing back and do the thing. But everything has a price, and I might be, as a matter of course, just putting a straight saddle on certain guitars, unless a fully compensated saddle is desired and asked for. Your version of cutting costs might be using really cheap wood. Everyone's doing something. It's normal to do that. So I'm sort of, I guess, taking the tone with this guy because there's a little laughy, half crying, half laughing emoji in this in this comment, which makes it a little bit of a snarky comment. So I know what you're doing there. Let's see. Won't read that one. Looking for a question here. Good question. A lot of just nice comments, but I need a question. I can't believe number one, I can't believe I just watched 37 minutes about saddle compensation. Number two, I can't believe I enjoyed it. That's a great comment. Yeah, this kind of the stuff like we as geeky guitar people watch. It is kind of funny when you put it that way. 37 minutes of saddle compensation. Most people would be, I don't know, poking their eyes out after 5 minutes of that. Okay, let's see. Maybe we can get like one or two more here. Hey, mate, nice video. How would you make a 12 string? This is from Sonic Cart. How would you make a 12 string fully compensated bridge? Could you please make a video explaining how to mark out a bridge? The wound strings and plain strings are right next to each other. Okay, I'm not going to read the rest of this, but the short answer of it is good luck. So I don't make 12 strings. So there's, I'm sure, plenty of people who have this dialed in. The one thing I do know is that full, like, proper intonation on a 12 string is difficult. I mean, that saddle is going to be going all sorts of ways. So yeah, good luck with that. I don't know. Google around. Someone's got it figured out. Just not me, man. Let's see. Furch writes, your channel is a voice of wisdom and an island of knowledge on the sea of shit. Great. An island of knowledge on the sea of shit. I love it. Okay, and you know what? Wait. I think there was another good one down here. Okay, Chief Thunderwolf writes, how does the amount of compensation you use for nylon compare to what one uses for steel string? In the video, me, freehand sketches offsets to match the thickness of the blank. Would you use the same offset amount as he does, or maybe follow the same pattern but with half the amount of compensation or some other formula? Yeah, so it would be definitely some other formula. A big part of the pattern that you see on the steel strings is dictated by the fact that 4 of those strings are wound. They have windings on them. And then 2 of the strings, the B and the treble E, are plain steel strings. And that's why, for example, you have this sort of angled line coming down to the G, and then a huge jump to the side, to the back, I mean, of the saddle for the B string, because suddenly you've switched to unwound strings, which means that the diameter of the core of that unwound B string is massive, is absolutely massive compared to the core diameter, not the full diameter with the windings, but the core diameter of the adjacent G and even the D string there. So I say all that to say nylon strings are just nylon all the way across. I know there's like special types of strings and different stuff out there, but you know, I'm trying to be as general as possible here. So yeah, there would just be, if you really wanted to dial in that compensation, I don't build classical, so if anybody wants to correct me on this, you're just making the amount of correction that you're making there on the saddle should be very slight, and it's going to be more proportional across the saddle rather than this kind of goofy pattern that jumps around. So I hope that helps. Anyway, so I'm out of time here. I got to go to the beach. This was fun. I will see you guys in the next one, and bye for now.